This is a terrific opera. Well, first of all, thanks so much, Dale, for the invitation. I'm just thrilled to be here. It's just wonderful. I had a great time here last time and the time before, and I expect the same thing. Love this city. I'm a prairie boy. I'm from Winnipeg originally. I don't know how many people know that, so it's that much colder, northern, and hotter in the summer, truly. So I'm really looking forward to this whole thing, especially tackling the Manon Lescaut unpopularity thing. I think it's not fair that it's not as popular as it is. I think there's some good reasons for it. It's a genius in development, right? Early Puccini, and he hadn't quite. We were just talking about some of the vocal considerations for the tenor, especially, and others. And there's just some things you can tell that soon he will be a full-fledged genius. And in some aspects, the vocal writing is not as easy as it could be for the ones carrying doing all the heavy lifting. Okay. Dramaturgically, also not quite as toweringly brilliant as others, but in a really interesting way that we can connect to and make powerful and compelling for our audience. It's a mess. And that's a good thing. The mess comes from the fact that when he took the source material, which resonated with him in a way that I'll maybe illustrate in a second, and it went through a blender of librettists, right? 5 of them apparently, including Illica and Giocosa, who went on to do all the big hits for him. Michael Cavanagh was in there, wasn't he? I think as one of some of you have Wikipedia'd this, I'm glad to see. Actually, I'm not. Now I can't make anything up. Anyway, so we went through tons of revisions, lots of things. It's one of those operas where so much happens in the intermissions, right? Like lots of operas, especially between the first act and the second. There's a whole chunk of the original novel is missing. But having said that, the fact that it is so sort of sprawling and episodic and chopped up and stitched together again is one of its strengths. And people see it as a weakness. The other big weakness, of course, is the whole desert of Louisiana. But I'm saving, again, a chat about that for down the road. Okay. Because the mess of it is a strength for it because so are we. We are also a complicated mess, and I am speaking very personally right now. That sometimes we do not appreciate what we have right in front of our faces. So we're yearning, sometimes, most of the time, we're yearning for something else. We have an inability to hang on to that which is most important, maybe because it is. One of the big themes of this show is that people's insecurity arises not out of a fear of failure, which so many of us think is a great motivator, but a fear of success. I don't know if you've ever heard of that concept, that people get frozen or people do really dangerous and things that sabotage their own success, not because they're afraid that they will fail, but that they're afraid that they don't deserve success. And there's something about them that says, I can't be happy, so there's some fatal flaw in me that doesn't allow me to enjoy what I currently have because I feel like I don't deserve it. I have to restlessly search, is that sounding increasingly familiar? For something else, elsewhereness, you could call it. And we always feel, well, it's the grass is greener syndrome, isn't it? And that is what's really driving her and this piece, this complicated messiness that is human life. So it's a fantastic introduction to Puccini's tackling of this whole verismo idea, this idea of realism in the operatic theater. That Verdi really started, of course, or really, pushed that ball down the hill, the snow ball down the hill, and Puccini embraced fantastically. I think he also embraced one of the great works of Middle Verdi, which is Traviata. Aren't there so many connections to the storyline and the idea of Traviata? And especially in the way the piece is, or the way the source material came to the composer. Traviata, of course, based on a memoir, right, from the Dumas, Périphy, and all that business, based on a real person. This one isn't, but it's based on an idea that the Abbé Prévost. And now, do we know about the Abbé Prévost and the original source material? There's a few nodding heads, very good, but I'll fill the rest of you in quickly. It was based on Manon Lescaut was based on a novel by l'Abbé Prévost, a man of the cloth, also a military man, also a peripatetic sort, and shut that one down. Well-traveled, and also restless. Gave up his military career, gave up his ordinations, tried writing, went back to ordinations, went back to an evangelical sort of a career, and all sorts of things. And he ended up in Paris. He studied English. He went to London, studied English. Very well accomplished, but also a bit of a mess. And he has that in common with a lot of libretists, right? We're thinking of Da Ponte and others. But he wrote this novel in 1731, quite early. And it is a memoir more than a novel. It's a fictionalized memoir about his travels on the road and meeting a young man who is obviously distraught. He actually first encountered Manon on her way to Le Havre, where she's going to be shipped over to the New World. He understands instantly what's going on between the young woman who's distraught and the young man who's even more distraught and mooning at a distance at her, mooning in the 17th century way, and not Dale's. He happened to run into this young fellow a couple of years later, insisted on hearing the full story that brought him to this terrible state of mind that he finds him in, and writes down his story. So it is filtered, like all of so many of our stories. Traviata in particular, and this one in parallel, it is filtered. It's a person's memory, a traumatized man's memory of events that were epic and that he recalls in patches. And so you've got the filter of memory, you've got the filter of a person's view, and then you have l'Abbé Prévost, the writer, the chronicler of these memories, also filtering and putting his own opinions into the piece. Then there's another filter. It's refracted again through the prism of Puccini, of course, as he understood the great heroine of Traviata, because he knew her, of course, and as he understood the heroine of the Massenet opera, which was written only 10, 11 years previous. Yeah, how many? 9?
No.
And Brits and their education. So he was filtering it. He was determined to put his own layers on things and add his own opinions. And then we, of course, now it's come down to the Puccini, of course, and everything he does, but that is handed to us. And now it's our job, once again, to add those final filters. Musical interpretation, of course, and visual. And so that is what our production does so well. And you'll see that in just a second. But just to wrap up the thematic content, the power of the mess. When we look back at our memories, so many of them form cautionary tales for us. And that's what Traviata does, and that's especially what Puccini was tiptoeing towards. Not tiptoeing, he was striding towards it. I'll change that right now. Where he got to with Bohème, especially Butterfly and Tosca, all the big ones. Especially the tragic heroine operas, of which there are, 3/4. It's sad because they die, sure. But it's tragic. It's really tragic because their time was wasted. There's the caution in the cautionary tale. Don't waste your time. Bohème is tragic. Traviata is tragic for the same reasons. Because the guy was so full of his own blockages that he couldn't spend the preciously little amount of time they had together properly with this person. And Manon Lescaut's not quite that. It's close, though. It has elements of that. And you can see where Puccini is heading towards the great themes that he will really hang on to. The tragedy for all of us is that we don't make the most of what we have. All of us have a fatal disease called life, right? We all know how our operas are going to end. Opera, our art form, as life amplified and accelerated, shortens a person's lifespan into those 3, 4, 5 precious hours. And it can be so instructive to us to learn not to let yourself, your pride, your uptightness, your judgmental attitudes get in the way of happiness. And I'm talking to Rodolfo, as opposed to De Gruy. And I'm talking to, what's that guy's name? Alfredo, and all the others. There's lots of them. And that's the tragedy. When she dies, it's because their haunting farewells recall the happy times that they had and don't have anymore because you blew about 10 months or 2 years or 5 years in between there. Shame on you. De Gruy has a different problem, that his focus is so laser-like, especially he does not expect to find love, as we've already started to talk about that, but when it's there, he wants it. He wants to hang on to it with both hands and never let it go. Our poor Manon is cursed with humanity that's more resonant for the rest of us. And that is the idea that I cannot be happy with what I have for a reason that's unknown to me. So the great weakness that people talk about Manon Lescaut, about about her character, how can we like a person who's just in love with jewelry and everything, where she has love standing right there? Well, they're actually really closely connected. It's because it's so strong. It's because it's so powerful that drives, and because there's something about her in the way she was conditioned, it's either nature or nurture, to not be able to enjoy the zen of it, the enjoyment of what you have now, the moment. No matter what she has, she is hankering for something else. It's in the novel, it's in the libretto, and it's absolutely in the music. So the warning is there for all of us as we watch this piece, and then our job as visual artists, because we all are as well, is to put a production together that embraces these ideas. The idea of the multiplicity of what we want, the idea of the many filters of our memories and all the ways we can look at any story, especially one that's epic in our pasts, the way that things get refracted and reflected. So that sounds like a segue, doesn't it, Dale?
Yeah.
It sounds like a segue to a slideshow. So what we're going to see here are, and Carrie put this together wonderfully. She's quite fabulous. This is a concept. No, this is concept right up there. This is the original computerized generated imagery upon which this set was built, but it looks like that. Notice, first of all, the lack of hyperrealism. This is a memoir. This is a memory. The important things need to be there, but all the stuff, all of the stuff that links us to the idea that this is actually happening right before our eyes, is not there, deliberately so. What we want to do is to send us back in time to an idea, just like the idea of love is so important to De Gruy, just like the idea of other things are so important to her. And then notice, second of all, almost immediately, the reflective quality of everything. Everything shines, everything has reflection. This is actually mirrored. There are big mirrored walls that tilt and make our lighting designer's life a living hell. And various other production people, because you don't want to see the lamp, but you want to see the reflection of the people on it, and that it's illuminating. Other elements that you will see right away, this jagged edge, which I'm going to talk about in a second, very important framing devices that we have. And something that looks eerily like, a guillotine hovering over the stage. Call it the blade of Damocles. Rob can explain that because he has a classical education, I'm sure. Over to you.
Why am I getting older?
I don't know. So the framing of this, again, we want to set up this portal, this way to look into our story and give people a very large visual clue that, a set of clues, I suppose, that this is not a realistic treatment of the piece, that what we're doing is refracting it and reflecting it. We are all of us, every one of us, a collection of reflections. What that means for me is that you, who I don't know, are a lot of different things depending on who you're in front of, right? Sometimes we perform a lot in our daily lives, right? And performers for a living, and others just because. You're a different person in front of your child on his first day of kindergarten as you might be in front of someone else, your friend, and so on, right? I am pretending to be an opera stage director at this very moment. As we look around us, we see reflected back a different version of ourselves. That's why theater is interesting. That's why life is messy. And that's why this approach fits Manon Lescaut. Because they are reflected back to us, to each themselves, to the audience, very often. For Manon, this is important because she's enamored with, she has a love-hate relationship maybe, we have to talk about this, you and I, with her own reflection, with her own image. She's drawn to it inexorably, as so many of us are, but I think she can't stand the heat of it at other times, right? The judgmental eyes looking back at her. Of course, I've already set up why the reflective quality of everything is important for Desgrieux, and because it is his story. It's actually, no, that's wrong. It's her story as told by him, right? This is the memoir effect. It's definitely one person's story, but not from her perspective. It's from his. So you will see in the staging of it, I bring him in early, often. He reflects back, he observes some of the action, and as we talked about yesterday, he drops in on the party to devastating effect. The enacting. This is Act 1, by the way, which is town square sort of idea. We set up a little bar here. You know, any choristers in the room? Happy to know. And there's detritus lying around of travel, right? Because the carriage arrives. We don't see the carriage, but certainly all the luggage and everything does, and it's people in transition. It's a transient environment. Okay, then we go to what do we have next? What are people singing? Yes, it's Act 1, and here you get a really good view of the reflective quality of everything. There's the size of our chorus is doubled. Spectacle for free. How do you like that? Or tripled and quadrupled. Look at them up there, reflected upon the reflections of these people here. We have Batman up in the corner. No. The Dark Knight. No, that's one of those statues. It's just in this one photo. It takes on. Please get that out of your heads, because that will haunt you as it haunts me. We have certain little kind of quasi-realistic elements. The ivy on the balustrade there, and so on. And we have stairs. We have some levels to play with and to ascend upon, and we sort of retreat and advance either side of our main framing device. And I think, do we see that next? What do we have next? Yeah, look at this. Those side panels. Can we go back to?
Yeah.
These side panels close into what's called the document traveler. A traveler is a technical term about how a piece of scenery behaves. It travels as opposed to swag or ET. And it forms a huge three-part, like a folded document. And this is a terrific introductory device, as well as a transitional device from one part of the opera to the next. And one of the elements we added in Philadelphia when we remounted the original production was, now you can go ahead too, are excerpts from the original source material. This fills in some of the blanks in between the intermissions so helpfully to our audience. We've trained our audience very successfully over the last bunch of years to read along with us. So this is an effort to use that training to include our audience even deeper and get them drawn in even more. You can see the words here in particular are very close to his aria. Very shortly after meeting her and being struck square in the forehead by the power of her name for him and what it might mean, that what happens is the world falls away. the chorus, everybody retreats away, our document closes, and that aria takes place in this long. It's one of those fantastic timeout moments that we can do in theater, in our reactive moments, especially interpretive theater, where we're not trying to spoon feed a kind of realism to people. What we can now do is we can close it and we go into his thoughts that all happen in the snap of your fingers, and you can spend as much time out there as you want, as your words. This becomes then, as your words are sung to our audience, and we understand that this truly is from his perspective. That way, when this device comes back as a linking mechanism between all the other scenes, we get it. It's him. It's his voice speaking, and that we understand that it's his perspective. And this is actually taken from L'Abbé Prévost. I had a really wonderful time going through the piece and just distilling all of these excerpts. Okay, moving on.
This is still Act 1, the duet.
Yeah, this is Act 1. She comes gloriously down the stairs, and it also allows us beautiful saturated qualities of light, as you can see here, and we can really focus on what's important, and we can allow the other elements to recede into the background, including that haunting figure, he who shall not be named ever again. But where's Andrew? Andrew, this is intended to be a foreshadowing of not a malevolent figure, as Dale has already said, but of a figure whose presence looms over them. It's like Lady Diana famously said, Princess Diana, right? There are three of us in our marriage, right? Referring to Camilla. No? Check them out. So it allows us to focus in and expand out again more than most productions do, and I think that's so very important for what is essentially a two-hander. No offense to any of our other characters, and I will talk about you shortly here, Matt. Of course, we have the characters in support of our main two are absolutely essential because of the way that they line up into the thematic material. Exactly what we're talking about. Lescaut has a little bit of, the brother has a little bit of the same feeling that he's never quite happy with what he has. I feel that this guy is Abbé Prévost writ large. You know what I mean? He kind of wrote himself in. He's that guy he's a military man, right, the brother, but he's also trying to, he's move his chess pieces around as best he can at all times. Never quite happy with his current position, always trying to think a couple steps down the road. This restless, aggressive, hyper-competitive quality that is rewarded in men of the time, not so much for the women are punished for any kind of an effort to improve their station. I think that's another important thematic thread that's woven through this piece, is this gender inequality. It's so prevalent in so much opera. And our Geronte is, again, not a villainous sort, right? He has this, he's a collector is what he is, right? And he just happens to be, he's won the sort of financial lottery that allows him to collect whatever trinkets he desires. And he collects them like so many hoarders, obsessively and never with satisfaction. And he has that in common with Manon, especially when you read the original novel, is that she absolutely is completely in love with Des Grieux until his money runs out, and until she has something that she didn't before. But when you have it, now there's something else that you didn't have before. And so that's what's really driving this kind of person. All three of you share that, this idea that I want something desperately until I have it. Okay, moving on. Act 2. Here you can especially see coming out to play our backdrop. Our backdrop is a series of painted scrims that light can come through, or we can highlight. And it has this beautiful floridity, but also sort of a sparsity, don't you find? It's deliberately so. We've kind of cleaned everything away, and we want to show this sort of you'd call it an Apollonian aesthetic, actually. This kind of beauty in sparsity, and it's refinement taken to the nth degree. and again, things are reflected. These series of backdrops, even though this is an interior, has a cloudscape feeling to it. And there's the one cloudscape after another in the background of our scenery. And of course, the main feature of this is an oversized toy. And am I referring to the set piece or the person in it? Discuss. Both, I'd say, wouldn't you? And so he has, our Durante has showcases for his showcase pieces. And so when all his society arrives and they offer presents and the dance scene and everything else happens, this is where she is. She's revealed inside the jewelry cabinet. She's probably counting the rubies right now. Oh, hello. Okay, moving on, please. So here we have our dancing master, and now, of course, this features this fantastic wiggery and wardrobing. It's really, the wardrobing in this piece is fantastic, and it's a real showcase opportunity for wigs and makeup as well. Not just because of the spectacle of this scene or the incredible quality of it all, but how it then goes terribly, messily, filthily wrong. So that sounds like a segue to me, Carrie. Oh, there she is. We get a little close up. Notice the connected element hovering over top of everything else. We've seen him before, and here he is again. And it's always this foreboding, if not malevolent, presence. Whether that's L'Abbé himself, it's intended to be Durante, or whether it's this whole notion of, he's obviously, whoever that is older, and that's it's like mortality hovering over the proceedings, saying, make the most of what you've got. Okay, so then we go to Act 3, which features this big stairway to... Nice, thank you. But no, wrong. It's a stairway to purgatory, I guess. I mean, these guys do go through all the Roman Catholic entities. They spend a little time in heaven. They certainly spend lots of time in purgatory, this kind of netherworld. And then they end up in their own particular version of hell. It has to be. And so this is a stairway to some unseen destination, deliberately so. And again, we bring back the elements from the first act, which are this transit, the items of transit, all the crates and boxes and barrels that are being shipped after the human cargo gets, hurried up the gangplank. And so this also allows us fantastic scenic elements upon which to perch choristers. I think we have that now. Nope. Trust me, they're there. And that's the idea. And we have our this sort of ascension, right? It's kind of like the end of Carmelites, almost, minus the sound effects. And again, this also allows us to have to use these big blocks of color and human, I guess, imagery as well. With the chorus serve a really important function in this piece as a reflection of the society and as a reflection of the arc of the storytelling of this piece, which is that it starts in this sort of pastoral bucolic happiness and then through the refinement starts to sort of devolve. And the piece gets darker and sterner and cleaner in a bad way. More intimidating, I suppose. And here we have this block of stern faces and dark clothing and mockery and kind of it's very much an upside down version of our Act 1, which is all about the celebration of happiness and celebrating what it is that we have in life. And then we get to the desert of Louisiana. Doesn't that look like it? No. First of all, let me put this. Let's dismantle that myth right now. It was never intended to be the desert of Louisiana. That I can only imagine that in the very first libretto writings, they just got it wrong. They'd never been there. They didn't know their geography, and they just wrote it. They mistranslated it from the French or however. I'm not sure. One thing we do know is that L'Abbé Prévost in the original source material had the two of them, after living for months and months in what was then a sort of an outpost, but came to be New Orleans, They had to flee, and I won't bore you with why. It's not boring, actually. It's quite exciting, but it's gobbling up more time, about why they had to flee that town as well. More misadventures for the two of them. They have to run away, and they try to make it to a British settlement somewhere in the Northern Territories. So, and they have no idea of their own geography. So they go to the outskirts of the New Orleans, of the Louisiana Territory. Okay, does that make more sense now? Now we're starting to talk about, what, Texas maybe? East Texas, heading up north and into Oklahoma. Who knows where they're going? But now it's certainly, and also in the libretto itself and in the book, it's also described more of a wilderness than a desert. And if you're determined to stay in Louisiana and their thirst for water makes no sense, I don't know if those of you who've been there, I wouldn't drink any of the water lying around in the out regions of New Orleans either. For our purposes, though, what we have done is placed it quite obviously in no place. And this is, again, the story arc that we're talking about, that it devolves and sort of deconstructs, and what we're really left with is someplace up here for the two of them. To my mind, they could even be on a raft at sea. They could be anywhere. What they are is in a mind space that has driven them to the absolute brink, right? They are tortured by the coulda, shouldas, and wouldas. They're tortured by the wasted time that they had for each other that now is increasingly at an end. And they're tortured by what should have been. Most importantly, I'll begin and end with that. And they are also haunted by the wreckage of the false promise of their happier times. And that's sort of symbolized by the broken cabinet tipped on its side, this ruined showcase for ruined people. And she at a certain point, actually, she lies down in this as, when she's just so tired she can't continue. So we see the antithesis of this glorious debut. It's an ignominious end, if anything. And then the final statement we have is the return to the memoir. It's one of those operas where the death of the heroine is so tricky, right? It's my golden rule is thou shalt not roll thy eyes. I'm talking to the audience now, right? Because then, and this is another reason why this opera tends not to be as popular as we all feel it deserves to be. And that is, at the end, it's hokey, it can be hokey, it can be unbelievable. But if you just put it to where it was intended, in other words, a memoir, a memory of a certain event, a memory of a woman and love that he no longer has, then she dies on the other side of his memories. She is gone. She says goodbye to him. The traveler closes. His memoir begins, and he's left exactly as we saw him at the beginning of the opera, alone, reflecting on what went wrong. Thank you.